The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening. Jennifer gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as she drove through the dark streets. She'd just finished a long parent-teacher conference at the elementary school where she taught third grade. All she wanted was to get home, kick off her shoes, and hug her two kids before bedtime. At 34, Jennifer thought she had life figured out. She had a job she loved, a supportive husband named Robert, and two beautiful children. Her daughter, Lily, was 8, always curious and full of questions. Her son Noah was 6, with an infectious laugh that could brighten anyone's day. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Really good. The traffic light ahead turned red, and Jennifer slowed to a stop. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 7:45. If she hurried, she could still make it home in time to read Noah his favorite bedtime story. She reached for her phone to text Robert that she was almost there. That's when everything changed. The impact came without warning, a deafening crash of metal against metal. Jennifer's world exploded into chaos. Her car lurched forward violently, tires screeching against wet pavement. She felt herself being thrown around like a rag doll, even with her seatbelt on. Glass shattered. Metal crunched. And then there was spinning. Her car spun completely around, crossing into the opposite lane. Time seemed to move in slow motion and lightning fast all at once. Jennifer saw headlights coming toward her. She tried to turn the wheel, but her hands wouldn't work right. Another impact. This time from the side. More crunching metal, more breaking glass. And then finally, her car came to a stop. Jennifer tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. She couldn't feel her legs. There was a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest with every breath. Her head felt like it was going to explode. She could taste blood in her mouth. Through the spider-webbed windshield, she could see people running toward her car. Their mouths were moving, but she couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched ringing in her ears. Someone was trying to open her door. A woman's face appeared in the window, saying something Jennifer couldn't make out. Everything was getting fuzzy. The woman's face started to fade. Jennifer thought about Lily and Noah. She wondered if they were already in their pajamas waiting for her. She tried to say their names, but no sound came out. Then everything went dark. Robert got the call at 8:15. He was in the middle of helping Noah brush his teeth when his phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, but serious. There had been an accident. His wife had been taken to Memorial Hospital. He needed to come right away. His hands shook as he called his mother to come stay with the kids. He didn't tell them the truth. He couldn't. He just said their mom had to work late and he needed to go help her. Lily looked at him with those knowing eyes of hers, the ones that saw right through him. But she didn't ask questions. She just hugged him tight before he left. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. A doctor with tired eyes met Robert in the waiting room. The words came at him like punches. Fractured spine, broken ribs, traumatic brain injury, induced coma, critical condition. The next 48 hours would be crucial. Robert couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. Just this morning, Jennifer had kissed him goodbye and reminded him to pick up milk on the way home. This morning, everything had been normal. A police officer approached him an hour later. The driver who hit Jennifer was a 22-year-old man named Daniel. He'd been drunk. Very drunk. This wasn't even his first offense. It was his third DUI. Third. And he'd barely gotten a scratch on him. He'd walked away from the accident that left Jennifer fighting for her life. Robert felt rage boil up inside him. How was that fair? How was any of this fair? Days blended together in that hospital. Robert barely left Jennifer's side. His mother brought Lily and Noah to visit, but the sight of their mother hooked up to all those machines, her face bruised and swollen, was too much. Lily cried silently, holding Jennifer's hand. Noah didn't understand why Mommy wouldn't wake up. He kept asking when she'd come home to read him stories. The doctors talked about the extent of her injuries. Even if she woke up, there was a good chance she'd never walk normally again. The damage to her spine was severe. She'd need months, maybe years, of physical therapy. And her teaching career? That might be over. Robert watched his wife lying there so still and vulnerable. The woman who danced in the kitchen while making breakfast. The woman who chased their kids around the backyard, laughing until she couldn't breathe. The woman who made every day feel like an adventure. Would she ever be that person again? 3 weeks passed, the longest 3 weeks of Robert's life. He'd taken leave from his job at the accounting firm. Bills were piling up. The hospital costs were already astronomical, and they'd barely begun. Their insurance would cover some of it, but not nearly enough. Then, on a Wednesday morning, Jennifer's eyes fluttered open. Robert was holding her hand when it happened. He'd been talking to her like he did every day, telling her about what the kids were doing, about the garden that needed weeding, about nothing and everything. And suddenly she was looking at him. Her eyes were confused and unfocused, but they were open. She was awake. The doctors came rushing in. They checked her vital signs, shined lights in her eyes, asked her questions. Could she hear them? Did she know her name? Did she know where she was? Jennifer's responses were slow and slurred, but she responded. She was really awake. Over the next few days, she became more alert. But with consciousness came the terrible reality of her situation. She couldn't move her legs the way she wanted to. Every breath hurt because of her broken ribs. Her head throbbed constantly, and when the doctors explained the extent of her injuries, when they told her about the long road ahead, Jennifer broke down and cried. Robert held her as best he could without hurting her. He told her they'd get through this together. But inside, he was terrified. How would they manage? How would they pay for everything? How would they explain this to their children? And there was something else eating at him. Daniel, the drunk driver, was out on bail. He was home, sleeping in his own bed, living his life while Jennifer was trapped in a hospital bed. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for next month. Robert had already contacted the prosecutor. He wanted to make sure that man paid for what he'd done. Jennifer had always been the gentle one, the one who saw the good in everyone. But Robert wasn't like that. Not anymore. Not after this. Someone had nearly killed his wife, destroyed their lives, and for what? Because he couldn't be bothered to call a cab? Because he thought the rules didn't apply to him? Robert wanted justice. No, that wasn't quite right. He wanted revenge. As he sat beside Jennifer's hospital bed that night, watching her sleep with the help of pain medication, he made a silent promise. Daniel would pay for this. Robert would make absolutely sure of it. He'd do whatever it took to see that man locked up for as long as possible. He had no way of knowing that Jennifer, in the months to come, would have very different ideas about justice. Ideas that would shock him. Ideas that would test their marriage and challenge everything he thought he knew about right and wrong. But that was still ahead. For now, all that mattered was that Jennifer was alive. The rest they'd figure out later. The physical therapy room smelled like rubber mats and determination. Jennifer gritted her teeth as the therapist guided her leg through another painful stretch. 4 months had passed since the accident, and every single day was a battle against her own body. She'd been transferred from the hospital to a rehabilitation center 6 weeks ago. The place was filled with people fighting their own wars, stroke victims learning to speak again, accident survivors like her, trying to reclaim their mobility, athletes with shattered dreams and shattered bones. Everyone here was broken in some way, trying to piece themselves back together. Jennifer hated it. She hated the pain. She hated the pity in people's eyes. She hated that she needed help with basic things like getting dressed or taking a shower. Most of all, she hated Daniel, the man who did this to her. At first, she tried not to think about him. She focused on her recovery, on getting better, on being there for her kids. Lily and Noah visited every weekend, and she put on a brave face for them. She smiled and told them Mommy was getting stronger. She listened to their stories about school and friends and all the normal things happening in their lives while hers had stopped completely. But at night, alone in her room, the anger came. It started as a small burning ember in her chest and grew into a raging fire. She'd lie awake, thinking about Daniel out there somewhere, living his life while she was trapped in this rehabilitation center. Was he at a bar right now? Was he drinking again? Did he even care what he'd done to her? Robert fueled that anger, though he probably didn't mean to. Every time he visited, he had updates about the case. Daniel's lawyer was trying to get the charges reduced. They were claiming he was remorseful, that he had a troubled past, that sending him to prison for too long would ruin his life. Ruin his life? Jennifer had screamed when Robert told her that. What about my life? What about our lives? Her voice had been so loud that a nurse came running thinking something was wrong. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. And it was all Daniel's fault. The preliminary hearing came and went. Daniel showed up in a suit looking like any other young man. His lawyer did most of the talking. Daniel himself barely said a word. He didn't look at Jennifer once, even though she was there in the courtroom in her wheelchair, her walker beside her. That lack of acknowledgement made her even angrier. How dare he not even look at her? How dare he stand there like this was just some inconvenience in his day? The judge set a trial date for 3 months away. Robert's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, assured them that the case was strong. With Daniel's prior DUI convictions, he was looking at serious prison time. That should have made Jennifer feel better. It didn't. Back at the rehabilitation center, Jennifer threw herself into her therapy with a new intensity. Every painful step, every agonizing stretch, every small victory was fueled by rage. Her therapist, a kind man named Tom, noticed the change. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said one afternoon after a particularly brutal session. "Anger can be a good motivator, but it's also dangerous. You need to be careful." Jennifer didn't want to be careful. She wanted to walk again. She wanted to prove that Daniel hadn't broken her completely. She wanted to stand up at that trial and tell the judge exactly what he'd done to her family. She started writing her victim impact statement in her head. At first, it was just fragments, angry thoughts that she couldn't quite organize. But as the weeks went on, it became more focused, more detailed, more brutal. She'd tell them about the night she woke up and couldn't move her legs, about the terror in her children's eyes when they saw her in the hospital, about the medical bills that were burying her family in debt, about the career she'd worked so hard to build, now hanging by a thread because she couldn't stand. For more than 15 minutes, without excruciating pain, she'd make sure everyone in that courtroom understood exactly what Daniel had taken from her. 7 months after the accident, Jennifer finally came home. The house had been modified with ramps and grab bars. Her bedroom was now downstairs because she couldn't manage the stairs yet. Everything was different. Everything was wrong, but Lily and Noah were so happy to have her home. They helped her navigate the house, showed her all the little changes they'd made to accommodate her wheelchair. They decorated her room with drawings and welcome home signs. Their love was almost enough to quiet the anger. Almost Robert had taken on extra work to help with the bills. He was tired all the time, worn down by stress and worry. Jennifer could see what this was doing to their family, and it made her hate Daniel even more. This man she'd never met had reached into their lives and broken everything. One sleepless night, about 2 weeks after coming home, Jennifer did something she immediately regretted. She looked Daniel up online. She found his social media profiles. Most of them were private, but one wasn't. His mother's page was public, and Daniel was tagged in several posts. Jennifer told herself she just wanted to see what kind of person would do something like this. She expected to find someone who looked like a monster. Instead, she found someone who looked heartbreakingly ordinary, young, lost, in some of the older photos even happy. But it was his mother's posts that stopped Jennifer cold. They weren't what she expected. They weren't defensive or making excuses. They were heartbroken. Post after post about trying to get her son help, about addiction being a disease, about loving someone who was destroying themselves and not knowing how to save them. There was a post from 3 years ago about Daniel's younger brother being killed. Something about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jennifer read about the mother's grief, about watching Daniel spiral after losing his brother, about the drinking that started as a way to cope and became something he couldn't control. There were posts about rehab programs Daniel had tried and failed, about the mother's desperate attempts to get him help, about her own guilt for not being able to save him from himself. Jennifer closed the laptop, her hands shaking. She didn't want to see that. She didn't want Daniel to have a story. She didn't want him to be a person with pain and trauma. She wanted him to be a monster. Monsters were easy to hate, but now she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. Daniel wasn't just the drunk driver who hit her. He was someone's son, someone's brother once, someone who was broken long before he broke her. That realization made her even angrier in a different way. Why should she care about his pain? Why should his tragic backstory matter? Plenty of people had trauma. Plenty of people lost loved ones. They didn't all get behind the wheel drunk and destroy innocent lives. She tried to push those thoughts away. The trial was in 6 weeks. She needed to stay focused on her statement, on making sure Daniel paid for what he'd done. But something had shifted. Late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, Jennifer found herself thinking about Daniel's mother, about what it must feel like to watch your child destroy himself and hurt others in the process, about loving someone and not being able to save them. She thought about Lily and Noah. What if years from now one of them made a terrible mistake? What if they did something unforgivable? Would she stop loving them? Would she stop hoping they could change? These thoughts confused her, made her angry at herself. Why was she even thinking about this? Daniel wasn't her child. He was the person who nearly killed her. Robert noticed she was quieter than usual, more withdrawn. When he asked if she was okay, she lied and said she was just tired. How could she explain that she was having complicated feelings about the man they both wanted to see locked up for as long as possible? Patricia, their lawyer, called to discuss the trial strategy. She wanted Jennifer's victim impact statement to be powerful and emotional. She wanted the judge to see exactly how much damage Daniel had caused. Jennifer promised to have it written by the end of the week. She sat at the kitchen table for hours trying to write. The words that had come so easily in her head now felt heavy and hard. She wrote about the pain, the fear, the loss. But every time she tried to write about Daniel himself, about what kind of person could do this, she found herself hesitating. Was he a monster? Or was he a broken 22-year-old who made the worst possible choice on the worst possible night? Did it matter? Should it matter? Jennifer didn't know, and that uncertainty terrified her more than the anger ever had. Anger was simple. Anger was clear. This new feeling, this uncomfortable compassion creeping in at the edges, was complicated and confusing. She finally finished her statement at 2 a.m. It was harsh and unforgiving. It detailed every way Daniel had destroyed her life. It demanded maximum punishment. It was exactly what Robert and Patricia wanted. But as Jennifer saved the document and closed her laptop, she felt sick to her stomach. Something was wrong. Something was shifting inside her that she didn't fully understand yet. She wheeled herself to the window and looked out at the dark street. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably sleeping in his own bed waiting for his trial, probably terrified, probably hating himself. Jennifer had spent months hating him. It had given her strength when she needed it. But now, for the first time since the accident, she wondered if there might be another way, a different kind of strength. The thought was barely formed, just a whisper in the back of her mind. But it was there. And Jennifer had a feeling it wasn't going away. Jennifer couldn't sleep again. It had been 3 nights since she'd looked at Daniel's mother's social media posts, and those images kept running through her mind like a movie she couldn't turn off. She kept seeing that one photo of Daniel as a teenager, smiling next to his younger brother. Both of them looked so young, so full of life. She wondered what happened to that kid in the photo. How did he become the person who got behind the wheel drunk and shattered so many lives? Robert was snoring softly beside her. He'd be horrified if he knew what she was thinking. Her sister Amy definitely would be. Everyone wanted the same thing, maximum punishment for Daniel. They wanted him locked away for as long as possible. And Jennifer had wanted that too. She still did, didn't she? At 4 a.m, Jennifer made a decision that would change everything. She wheeled herself to the kitchen, opened her laptop, and started writing a letter. Not to the judge, not to her lawyer, to Daniel. Her hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time before she started typing. What do you say to someone who almost killed you? What words could possibly bridge that gap? She started with the truth. She told him about the accident from her perspective, about waking up unable to move, about her children's faces when they saw her in the hospital, about the months of painful therapy, about the bills that were drowning her family, about the nightmares she still had. But then she wrote something she didn't expect. She told him she'd seen his mother's posts. She told him she knew about his brother. She told him that while it didn't excuse what he'd done, she understood that hurt people sometimes hurt people. She told him that she believed he was more than the worst thing he'd ever done. The last paragraph was the hardest to write. She told him that she was trying to forgive him. Not because what he did was okay. Not because she wasn't still angry. But because holding on to hate was destroying her just as much as the accident had. Maybe more. She read the letter 3 times before printing it. Her finger hovered over the mouse, ready to delete it. This was crazy. Everyone would think she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had, but she printed it anyway, signed it, sealed it in an envelope. The next morning, before she could change her mind, she mailed it to the county jail where Daniel was being held. Jennifer didn't tell anyone what she'd done. Not Robert. Not Patricia. Not even her best friend Claire. She just went about her days, doing her therapy, playing with her kids, trying to act normal while wondering if Daniel would even read her letter. Maybe he'd throw it away. Maybe he'd laugh at it. Maybe it wouldn't make any difference at all. 2 weeks passed. Jennifer started to think the letter had been a mistake. Then on a Thursday afternoon, she got a letter back. Her hands shook as she opened it. Daniel's handwriting was messy, like he'd been crying while he wrote. Maybe he had been. The letter started with an apology. Not the kind of apology lawyers write, full of careful words that don't really mean anything. This was raw and painful and real. He said he was sorry in about 15 different ways. He said he thought about her every single day. About what he'd done. About how he wished he could take it back. He wrote about the night of the accident. How he'd been drinking to forget the anniversary of his brother's death. How he knew he shouldn't drive but did it anyway because he'd done it before and gotten away with it. How he'd made a choice, a stupid, selfish, terrible choice, and now he had to live with the consequences forever. He wrote about growing up in foster care after his mom lost custody when he was 9. About bouncing between homes where nobody really wanted him. About finally getting back to his mom when he was 16, only to watch his little brother get shot 2 years later. About drinking to numb the pain and guilt, because he'd been the one who told his brother to go to that party where he got killed. None of it was an excuse. Daniel said that over and over. Nothing excused what he'd done. But he wanted her to know that he wasn't just some careless person who didn't care. He cared. He cared so much it was killing him. The last part of the letter was about jail. About how he'd finally gotten sober. About the programs he was taking. About how for the first time in years he was actually trying to fix himself. He said her letter had given him something he hadn't had in a long time. Hope that maybe he could be better than his worst moment. He ended by saying he understood if she hated him. He said he deserved it. But he thanked her for seeing him as a human being instead of just a monster. Jennifer cried as she read it. Not tears of anger this time. Something more complicated, something she couldn't quite name. She kept the letter hidden in her nightstand drawer. Over the next few weeks, she read it so many times she practically memorized it. And slowly something started to shift inside her. The trial was now just 2 weeks away. Patricia called to go over Jennifer's victim impact statement one more time. As the lawyer read it back to her, Jennifer felt sick. The words sounded so harsh, so full of hate. They weren't wrong exactly. Everything in the statement was true. But they weren't complete either. Actually, Jennifer heard herself say, I need to rewrite it. Patricia paused. Rewrite it? Jennifer, it's perfect as is. Very powerful. The judge needs to hear this. I know, Jennifer said, but it's not what I want to say anymore. After she hung up, Robert came into the room. He'd heard part of the conversation. What do you mean you want to rewrite it? We've been working on this for months. Jennifer took a deep breath. It was time to tell him the truth. I wrote to Daniel, and he wrote back. The look on Robert's face was something between shock and betrayal. You did what? I needed to, she said quietly. I needed to tell him how much he hurt us. But also I needed to see if he was even sorry. Of course he's sorry now, Robert said, his voice rising. He's going to trial. His lawyer probably told him what to say. It wasn't like that, Jennifer said. Robert, he's a real person. A broken, messed up person who made a terrible choice. But he's not a monster. He almost killed you, Robert shouted. He never shouted. He destroyed our lives. And you're defending him? I'm not defending what he did, Jennifer said, tears streaming down her face. What he did was unforgivable. But I'm trying to forgive him anyway, for me, because this anger is eating me alive. Robert stared at her like he didn't recognize her. So what, you just want him to walk free? You want to let him off the hook? No, Jennifer said firmly. He needs to face consequences. He needs help. He needs to be held accountable. But destroying his entire life won't heal mine. Don't you see that? Robert didn't see it. He left the room without another word. That night he slept on the couch. Jennifer's sister Amy had an even worse reaction when she found out. She called Jennifer naive, foolish, too forgiving for her own good. She said Daniel was manipulating her, playing on her sympathy. She said Jennifer was making a huge mistake, maybe she was. Jennifer honestly didn't know anymore. All she knew was that carrying around all that hate had been exhausting. And somewhere in the process of trying to forgive Daniel, she'd found a strange kind of peace. She rewrote her victim impact statement. This version was honest about the pain and trauma, but it was also honest about something else. She told the judge that punishment alone wouldn't fix what was broken, that Daniel needed treatment for his addiction, that he needed a chance to prove he could be better. She asked for a sentence that included mandatory rehabilitation, community service, restitution for her medical bills, but also, eventually, a second chance. When Patricia read the new statement, she was speechless. "Jennifer, are you absolutely sure about this? The prosecutor is expecting you to ask for maximum sentencing." "I'm sure," Jennifer said. She wasn't, really. But she was committed to trying. The day of the sentencing hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Robert sat stiffly beside her, barely speaking. Her sister Amy had refused to come at all. Patricia looked worried. Daniel was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked thinner than in his photos. Older. When his eyes met Jennifer's across the courtroom, he looked away quickly, but not before she saw the shame and fear there. The prosecutor went first, painting Daniel as a repeat offender who deserved no mercy. He showed photos of Jennifer's wrecked car, medical reports detailing her injuries. He made a compelling case for a lengthy prison sentence. Then it was Jennifer's turn to speak. She wheeled herself up to the front of the courtroom. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her statement. Behind her, she heard someone in the gallery whisper, "This is going to be brutal." Jennifer looked at Daniel. Really looked at him. He was crying, silently, tears running down his face. She looked at his mother in the front row, clutching a tissue, her face a mask of grief. Then she looked at Robert, at the anger and confusion in his eyes, at Patricia waiting expectantly, at the judge, pen poised to take notes. Jennifer took a deep breath and began to read. As her words filled the courtroom, she could hear gasps of surprise. This wasn't what anyone expected. She spoke about her pain, yes, but also about Daniel's humanity, about the cycle of trauma and addiction, about her belief that people could change if given the right support. When she finished with her request for treatment and eventual second chances instead of maximum punishment, the courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge had to bang his gavel for silence. Robert's face had gone pale. Someone behind her, probably from the prosecutor's office, muttered, "Is she serious?" Daniel was staring at her with an expression of complete disbelief. His lawyer looked equally stunned. Even the judge seemed taken aback. The judge asked Jennifer if she was certain this was what she wanted. She said yes. He asked her to explain why. And Jennifer, speaking from her heart, told the entire courtroom about the power of forgiveness, not as weakness but as strength, not as excusing the crime but as refusing to be defined by it. When she finished, there was complete silence. Then the judge spoke. He said that in all his years on the bench, he'd never heard a victim impact statement like this one. He said he needed time to consider his sentence carefully. The hearing was adjourned. As Jennifer wheeled herself out of the courtroom, she felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. She'd done something that felt impossible, but she had no idea if anyone, especially the people she loved most, would ever understand why. The drive home from the courthouse was silent except for the sound of rain against the windshield. Robert gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat, her wheelchair folded in the back, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settling over her like a heavy blanket. "Say something," she finally whispered. "What do you want me to say?" Robert's voice was tight with controlled anger. "That I understand? Because I don't. That man almost took you from our children, from me, and you stood up in that courtroom and asked them to go easy on him." "That's not what I did," Jennifer said. "I asked for accountability and treatment, not a free pass." It sure sounded like a free pass to me. To everyone in that room. Robert pulled into their driveway but didn't turn off the engine. "Your sister called me during the break. She thinks you've lost your mind. Maybe she's right. Those words hurt more than Jennifer expected. I haven't lost my mind. I've found my peace. By letting him off the hook? He's not off the hook, Robert. He's still facing prison time. But what good does it do anyone if we just throw him away and forget about him? He'll get out eventually anyway. Probably even more broken than before. Is that what you want? Robert finally looked at her. His eyes were red. I want him to pay for what he did. I want him to feel even a fraction of the pain we've felt. He does feel it, Jennifer said softly. Trust me, he does. But Robert couldn't hear her, not yet. He got out of the car and went inside without helping her out. Jennifer sat there for a moment, fighting back tears, before calling for Lily to help her. The next few days were the hardest of Jennifer's life, and that was saying something considering what she'd been through. Robert barely spoke to her. He slept on the couch, took extra shifts at work, avoided being home. When he was home, he was present for the kids but cold to her. Her sister Amy sent a long text message saying she was disappointed and couldn't support Jennifer's decision. Other family members took sides. Some called her brave. Others called her naive. The local newspaper ran a story about the unusual hearing, and suddenly everyone had an opinion. Strangers on social media called her an inspiration. Others called her a fool. Someone started a petition demanding the judge ignore her statement and give maximum sentencing. Another person started a counter-petition supporting her stance on restorative justice. Jennifer stopped reading the comments. She stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes. She focused on her kids, her therapy, and trying to hold her marriage together. Lily, wise beyond her 8 years, asked one evening, "Are you and Daddy fighting because of the bad man who hurt you?" Jennifer chose her words carefully. "We're not fighting exactly. We just see things differently right now, but we both love you and your brother very much." "That hasn't changed." "Claire's parents got divorced," Lily said quietly. "Is that going to happen to you?" The question broke Jennifer's heart. "No, sweetheart. Daddy and I are going through a hard time, but we're going to work through it. I promise." She hoped that was true. A week after the hearing, the judge announced his decision. Daniel would serve 5 years with the possibility of parole after 3, but only if he completed an intensive addiction treatment program and maintained sobriety. He'd be required to perform community service upon release and pay restitution to Jennifer's family. It was more lenient than the prosecutor wanted, but harsher than what Daniel's lawyer had hoped for. Everyone was somewhat unhappy, which probably meant it was fair. Patricia called Jennifer with the news. "The judge cited your statement specifically. He said your willingness to show mercy while still demanding accountability was, and I quote, a remarkable example of restorative justice in action. You should feel proud." Jennifer didn't feel proud. She felt exhausted and lonely. Robert had moved into the spare bedroom. Her sister still wasn't speaking to her. Half her friends thought she was a saint and the other half thought she was crazy. She wrote to Daniel again, telling him about the sentence. She told him this was his chance to prove that people really could change, that he'd better not waste it, that she was trusting him with her faith in humanity and he'd better not break it. She got a letter back 2 days later. Daniel's handwriting was shaky, emotional. He promised to complete every program available. He thanked her in ways that words seemed inadequate for. He said he would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of the grace she'd shown him. In prison, Daniel threw himself into his rehabilitation like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. He attended every addiction support group meeting. He got his GED, something he'd dropped out of high school without. He volunteered for a program that trained service dogs for veterans with PTSD. He read every book he could get his hands on about addiction, trauma, and recovery. His counselor noted in reports that she'd never seen someone so committed to change. Daniel told her about Jennifer's letters, about how this woman he'd nearly killed believed he could be better. He said he couldn't let her down, but Jennifer didn't know about any of that yet. She was fighting her own battles at home. 3 months after the sentencing, Robert finally talked to her. Really talked. It was late at night. Jennifer couldn't sleep as usual, and found him sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. "I've been thinking," he said as she wheeled herself into the room. "About what you said? About destroying his life, not healing yours." Jennifer held her breath, afraid to hope. "I still don't understand it," Robert continued. I don't think I ever will. But I've watched you these past months. You're different. Lighter, somehow, despite everything we're going through. And I realized something. All my anger at Daniel was actually making me sicker. Making us sicker? I know, Jennifer said softly. I saw what that anger was doing to you too before you made your decision. It was consuming you. And now, even though I'm angry at you for what you did, I can see that you're more at peace than you've been since the accident. Jennifer wheeled closer to him. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I was drowning in hate, and I needed to find a way to breathe again. Robert finally looked at her. His eyes were wet, I know, and I've been punishing you for finding that way. I'm sorry. They talked until the sun came up. Really talked in a way they hadn't in months. Robert admitted he was scared that forgiving Daniel meant forgetting what he'd done. Jennifer explained that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just meant not letting the worst moment of their lives define the rest of their lives. Slowly, painfully, they started to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't easy. There were still hard days when Robert's anger flared up. Days when Jennifer doubted her own decision. But they were talking again, working together again, remembering why they'd fallen in love in the first place. 6 months into Daniel's sentence, Jennifer did something that shocked everyone all over again. She requested a meeting with him through a restorative justice program, face-to-face. Robert initially refused to support it, but eventually agreed to go with her. The meeting was held in a small neutral room at the prison. A trained mediator was present. Jennifer's hands shook as they wheeled her in. Robert sat beside her, his jaw tight with tension. When Daniel walked in, Jennifer barely recognized him. He'd put on some healthy weight. His eyes, which had looked dead in the courtroom, now held something different. Hope, maybe, or determination. He sat down across from them, his hands folded on the table. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniel did something Jennifer didn't expect. He started crying. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I know I've said it before, but I need to say it to your face. I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. There's no excuse, no explanation that makes it okay. I took something from you that I can never give back. Jennifer felt her own tears starting. You did. You took a lot from me, from us. And you're right, it wasn't okay. It will never be okay. So why did you do it? Daniel asked, looking at her with confusion and gratitude mixed together. Why did you show me mercy? Why did you write to me? I don't deserve any of it. No, Jennifer agreed. You don't, but I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. Because holding on to that much hate was killing me, and maybe I did it because I have 2 kids, and I hope that if they ever make a terrible mistake, someone will see them as more than just that mistake. Robert spoke for the first time. His voice was hard. I want you to know that I didn't want to come here. I'm here because my wife asked me to be. I don't forgive you. I may never forgive you. Daniel nodded, wiping his eyes. I understand. I don't expect you to. I don't expect anyone to. But, Robert continued, I'm willing to listen. Tell me about the programs you're doing. Tell me what you're doing to make sure you never hurt anyone else like this again. And Daniel did. For the next hour, he talked about his journey. About getting sober. About facing his trauma in therapy. About learning skills and getting his education. About volunteering and trying to give something back. About the nightmares he still had about the accident. About how he thought about Jennifer and her family every single day. He talked about mentoring younger inmates who were struggling with addiction. About sharing his story as a warning. About the life he wanted to build when he got out, one focused on helping others avoid the mistakes he made. Jennifer listened, and something shifted in her chest. This wasn't the same broken young man who'd hit her car that rainy night. He was still broken, probably always would be in some ways, but he was trying to heal, really trying. When the meeting ended, Jennifer did something that made Robert stiffen beside her. She reached across the table and put her hand over Daniel's. Don't waste this chance, she said. Don't waste what I gave you. Be better for yourself, for your mom, for everyone. Daniel grabbed her hand with both of his, crying openly now. I won't, I promise. I swear on everything I won't. On the drive home, Robert was quiet again. But this time it wasn't angry silence. It was thoughtful silence. I still don't fully understand, he finally said, but I saw something in there. He's really trying. I know, Jennifer said, and you were right about something else. All that anger I've been carrying around, it's been eating me alive too. I don't know if I can forgive him like you did. but maybe I can try to let it go. For us, for the kids, for our future. Jennifer reached over and took his hand. That's all I'm asking. They drove home together, both of them carrying a little less weight than before. 3 years passed. 3 years that changed everything and everyone involved in ways nobody could have predicted that rainy October night. Jennifer stood in front of her third-grade classroom, leaning on her cane as she wrote vocabulary words on the whiteboard. She still couldn't stand for long periods. The chronic pain was still there, probably always would be, but she was teaching again, part-time at first, now nearly full-time. Her students didn't know about the accident. To them, she was just Mrs. Johnson, the teacher who always seemed to understand when things were hard. At home, her relationship with Robert had transformed. They'd been through hell and come out the other side different but stronger. Robert had started seeing a therapist to work through his own anger and trauma from the accident. He admitted that watching his wife nearly die had broken something in him too. They went to couples counseling. They talked. Really talked. About the hard things. The scary things. The things they'd been avoiding for years, even before the accident. Lily was 11 now, growing into a thoughtful young woman. Noah was 9, still energetic but more aware of how fragile life could be. They'd both seen their mother's journey of forgiveness, though they didn't fully understand it yet. But someday they would. Someday they'd face their own choices about anger and grace, and maybe what they'd witnessed would help them choose wisely. Daniel was released on parole after serving 3 years and 4 months. He'd completed every program available to him. His parole officer said he'd never seen someone so committed to staying on the right path. Daniel got a job with a construction company whose owner believed in second chances. The work was hard, physical, but Daniel threw himself into it with the same intensity he'd shown in his rehabilitation. He moved into a small apartment, barely furnished but clean and sober. On his walls he hung 2 things: a photo of his little brother, so he'd never forget why he'd started drinking, and a copy of the first letter Jennifer had sent him, so he'd never forget why he stopped. Every paycheck, Daniel sent money to Jennifer's family. It wasn't much. Construction work didn't pay great and he had his own bills. But he sent what he could for restitution. In 3 years he'd paid back maybe 5% of Jennifer's medical bills. It would take him a lifetime to pay it all back. He planned to spend that lifetime trying. But Daniel was doing something else too. Something that mattered more than money. 3 evenings a week he volunteered at a youth center in the neighborhood where he grew up. He talked to teenagers about addiction, about trauma, about the choices he made and the consequences that followed. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't make excuses. He just told the truth about how one terrible decision could destroy multiple lives. Some kids listened. Some didn't. But every time one of them chose not to drink at a party, or called a ride instead of driving, or decided to get help instead of self-medicating, Daniel felt like maybe he was starting to balance the scales. Not even close to balancing them, really, but starting. He'd been sober for 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. He went to support group meetings 3 times a week. He had a sponsor he called whenever the urge to drink crept in, which it still did sometimes, especially around the anniversary of his brother's death. But he had tools now. Support. A reason to stay sober that was bigger than himself. His mother cried when he got released. Happy tears this time. She'd visited him every month in prison, never giving up on him even when he'd given up on himself. She'd seen him at his worst. Now she was seeing him at his best, and it filled her heart with hope she thought she'd lost years ago. Jennifer heard about Daniel's release through the parole system. She'd requested updates as part of the restitution agreement. She knew about his job, his volunteer work, his sobriety. She'd written to him a few times over the years, checking in, encouraging him, reminding him why he needed to keep going. She never told most people about those letters. Robert knew. He'd made his peace with it, though it had taken time. But Amy, her sister, still didn't understand. They'd reconciled enough to be cordial at family gatherings, but their relationship would never be the same. Some people thought Jennifer's forgiveness was beautiful. Others thought it was foolish. Jennifer had learned to be okay with both reactions. 6 months after Daniel's release, Jennifer was invited to speak at a conference on restorative justice. She almost said no. Public speaking terrified her, and talking about the accident still hurt. But something told her to say yes. She stood on that stage looking out at hundreds of faces and told her story. She talked about the accident, the anger, the moment she chose forgiveness. She talked about how forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing. It meant refusing to let the worst moment of your life define all the moments that came after. She talked about how forgiveness had freed her. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, it had unlocked something in her heart that anger had kept chained up. She talked about how she still had bad days. Days when the pain was too much. Days when she wondered if she'd made the right choice. But mostly she had peace. Real peace. The kind that came from knowing she'd chosen grace over vengeance. When she finished speaking, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then everyone was on their feet, applauding. Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed to share this story, how much she'd needed to say out loud that choosing forgiveness was the hardest and best thing she'd ever done. After the conference, a young woman approached her. She was maybe 25, with tears in her eyes. "My father was killed by a drunk driver," she said. "I've been so angry for so long. Everyone told me I had a right to be angry, and I do. But listening to you, I realize that anger is destroying me. I don't know if I can forgive like you did, but I want to try." Jennifer hugged her tight. "It's not easy," she whispered. "And it's not immediate. But it's worth it. I promise." That conversation stayed with Jennifer. She started speaking more, sharing her story at conferences, colleges, support groups. She became an advocate for restorative justice programs, not because she thought everyone should make the same choice she did, but because she believed people should know there were options beyond just punishment or revenge. 1 year after his release, on the anniversary of the accident, Daniel did something he'd been planning for months. He showed up at the youth center where he volunteered, but this time there was a special event. It talked about drunk driving prevention, and the speaker was Jennifer. Daniel didn't know she'd be there. Jennifer didn't know he'd be there. When they saw each other across the room, they both froze. The event coordinator, realizing what was happening, asked if they were okay with both being there. Jennifer said yes. Daniel said yes. So they stayed. Jennifer spoke first, telling the room full of teenagers and their parents about the accident and its aftermath. She showed pictures of her wrecked car. She talked about the medical bills, the pain, the impact on her family. She didn't mention Daniel by name, but everyone in the room understood who had caused it. Then Daniel spoke. He introduced himself as the drunk driver. He told them about that night, about the choice he made, about the devastation that followed, about prison and rehabilitation and rebuilding his life. He told them that Jennifer, the woman he'd almost killed, had given him a second chance, and that he was spending his second chance trying to make sure no teenager in that room ever made the same mistake he did. When they finished speaking, they stood side by side while teenagers asked questions. Hard questions, emotional questions. How could she forgive him? How could he live with himself? What would they say to someone struggling with addiction? What would they say to someone who'd been hurt by a drunk driver? They answered honestly. Sometimes Jennifer answered. Sometimes Daniel did. Sometimes they answered together. It was powerful, raw, real. After the event, they stood in the parking lot talking for the first time outside of a prison visiting room. Daniel looked healthier, more at peace. So did Jennifer. "How are you?" Jennifer asked. "Sober," Daniel said with a small smile. 4 years, 2 months, 3 days, working, volunteering, trying to be someone my brother would be proud of." "He would be," Jennifer said. "I am." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I got your letters. All of them. They kept me going when I wanted to give up." "Good," Jennifer said. "Because I need you to keep going. You're doing important work. Those kids need to hear your story. Our story." "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I know I've said it 1,000 times, but thank you for seeing me as more than what I did, for giving me a chance to be better." Jennifer smiled, though her own eyes were wet. "We all need second chances, Daniel. I'm just glad you're using yours well." They parted ways that night, both changed by the encounter. Jennifer went home to her family, to Robert, who wrapped her in a hug and told her he was proud of her, to Lily and Noah, who were becoming amazing, humans in part because they'd watched their mother choose grace. Daniel went back to his small apartment, looked at his brother's photo and Jennifer's letter on the wall, and made a commitment. He would spend the rest of his life proving that Jennifer's faith in him wasn't misplaced. He would never touch alcohol again. He would volunteer and speak and try to prevent other kids from making his mistakes. He would work hard and pay back what he owed, even if it took forever. Most importantly, he would remember that people were more than their worst moments. Jennifer had taught him that. By seeing his humanity when everyone else only saw a criminal, she'd given him something to live up to. Years later, Jennifer would be asked in an interview if she ever regretted her choice to forgive. She thought about it carefully before answering. "There are hard days," she admitted. "Days when the pain is bad or I see my kids struggle with what happened, and I wonder if I should have been angrier, should have demanded more punishment. But then I remember what that anger felt like, how it was poisoning me, and I remember who Daniel has become, the kids he's helped, the lives he's changed, and I know I made the right choice. Not for him, for me, for my family, for everyone." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened. It didn't make the pain go away. But it freed me from being forever defined as a victim. It let me be a survivor instead. A person who faced the worst thing imaginable and chose to respond with grace instead of hate. That choice changed his life. But honestly, it changed mine more. And that was the truth. Jennifer's choice to forgive hadn't just changed Daniel's life. It had changed hers, changed her marriage, changed how her children saw the world, changed countless teenagers who heard them speak, changed the conversation about justice and redemption and what healing really means. She walked with a cane now. She lived with chronic pain. She'd never be the same person she was before that rainy October night. But she was something else. Something maybe better. Someone who understood that the hardest choices often lead to the most profound transformations. Someone who proved that even in our darkest moments, even when we have every right to hate, we still have the power to choose love, to choose healing, to choose forgiveness. And in choosing forgiveness, Jennifer had changed not just one life forever. She'd changed her own, changed her family's, changed Daniel's, changed everyone who heard their story, and realized that maybe, just maybe, grace was stronger than vengeance. Maybe mercy was braver than hate. Maybe forgiveness was the ultimate act of courage. Her story didn't have a perfect ending. Real life rarely does. But it had a hopeful one. And sometimes, hope is more powerful than perfection.